Hello, a very warm good evening to all of you, and welcome to Unacademy. Welcome to another session of your Conquer Prelims, where today we shall be covering the areas of current affairs relevant for your examination, which were in news and an important current affairs topic from the month of January up till May June 2025. So, for those of you who are unaware about it, so we are going to cover the current affairs of the entirety of the portion of previous year in two phases. Today we are going to cover Jan to June, and tomorrow we are going to cover the portion from June to December. Now, having said that, there are certain topics which are important for your prelims. For example, the conference of parties. Now, we have done an entire video associated with all the conference of parties for the climate convention, which can be important for your examination, along with the organizations which have been established on the sidelines. So, you will come across the Global Financial Organization, the GCE, all of those, along with, for example, the Global Methane Pledge, and so on. The link for that video is something that you will find in the description below. What is it that we are going to cover today? So today we are going to focus mostly on the areas associated with reports. Some of the reports have been released. So for your prelims, it is important for you to gather that who releases these reports and what do these reports indicate? What are the key findings associated? So very briefly, we will cover that. Then we are going to cover some of the ecosystem. For example, when we talk about seagrass, right? How is seagrass different from a seaweed? So from here also, prelims kind of questions can be framed. And in the case of seagrass, we know that, for example, you have dugongs, which live in those areas. So we shall also be covering some bit about the dugongs as well. So some of the species which have remained in use, some of the protected areas, for example, Hulong Par Wildlife Sanctuary. So where is that? What are the different types of Hulong gibbons who are found in India? The two different types. Along with that, peatlands, marshlands, and along with that, some of the other reports. So everything which is relevant for your prelims, you can rely on this, and revision of this is the way forward. Now, without further ado, let us initiate with the discussion of the topic. Now, if you want the PDF of the session, that shall be available in the link provided in the description, or that shall also be available on the Telegram channel, my Telegram channel. That shall also be available, from where do use that for revision purposes. Now, without further ado, starting with the first topic, that is the Asian waterbird census. Now, in this topic, we are going to cover some of the important parameters. Now, when we say Asian waterbird census, so what do we understand by the concept of the waterbird? Since when does this, or has this Asian waterbird census been carried on? Also, the concept of flyways, which are the important flyways across the country. And one of the areas where the waterbird census was carried out was Coringa Wildlife Sanctuary. So, in Coringa Wildlife Sanctuary, there are two important species that have been in use for the past couple of years now. That is the great knot and the Indian skimmer. So, all of those we are going to take a look into this topic. Now, Asian waterbird census. Now, this is a stock taking exercise or a population measurement exercise. Census, after all, population measurement exercise. Now, who brings this on? And since when has it been carried out? So this is an exercise which has been carried out since 1987. Now, this is the Asian waterbird census, mind you. So here, the regions which are covered chiefly are from the region of Afghanistan all the way till the region of Eastern and Southern Asia. So the Mekong River system, the various different regions in India, in China. Now, all these places, why it is important for you us to carry out the waterbird census? Because in all these places, you will find migratory species of birds who basically come from Central Asia, who come from the region of the Siberia, northeastern portion of Asia. During the winter months, they come to these warmer waters and they take refuge, they take shelter, and there that is where they breed. So once you have the idea of the population, you can then track it year after year, whether the ecosystem that you are trying to conserve, whether that is a good ecosystem or not, because that can indicate an increase in population or decrease in population. For example, when we talk about the northeastern states of our country, in northeastern states you basically have two Ramsar sites. Which are those two Ramsar sites, the major important Ramsar sites in northeastern states? There are two of them. One is in Assam, that is Deepor Beel. Another is Loktak Lake in Manipur. Now, when you talk about the case of Deepor Beel in Assam, now that is a large water body associated with the Brahmaputra river system. But owing to the municipal waste and owing to the dumping of the solid waste also, what has happened is that the region has become so polluted over a period of time, its area has also declined, and its ability to host these migratory of birds that has reduced. That is why many of the migratory species of birds, they are basically taking shelter in a water body close to the Beel. That is why conservationists in Assam, they want to declare another region as Ramsar site other than Deepor Beel. So all these details and factualities, they come to light if you take the census exercise. Now, this census exercise is a citizen science kind of program. So it is an open system, right? You can access this census. It is conducted annually. Now, it is a part of the global international waterbird census, which is coordinated by Wetland International, because most of these waterbirds, they take refuge in these wetlands. In India, in certain parts, for example, in the Coringa Wildlife Sanctuary, this is carried out by two agencies. Now, this becomes important for your prelims. Which are the organizations in India which can be associated with Asian waterbird census? That kind of a question can be asked. So, which are those two organizations? You have BNHS, that is Bombay Natural History Society, and Wildlife Institute of India. Mind you, in 2014 prelims, you had a direct question that UPSC had asked in the examination that BNHS deals with which of these activities. So, there, the bird population and conservation of the bird species is something which is an easy answer if you know what BNHS actually does. Now, why is India important for the water bird species? So, that is where in this particular map, you will observe the presence of certain marked lines. All these marked lines, they indicate the migratory pattern of the bird species, right? So, these are what are referred to, yeah, your flyways. Flyways. So the migratory species of birds, they don't go randomly anywhere and everywhere. They follow a certain route. They have certain places where they will take the interim break as well. So everything is predetermined and predefined. Now, when you take a look at the region of India, so across the world, there are 8 to 9 different flyways. Now, across India itself, you will find that three flyways, they pass through India. One is the Central Asian Flyway, another is the West Asian East African Flyway, and the third one, which impacts the region of Deepor Beel, Loktak Lake, Brahmaputra River system, and so on, that is the East Asian Australasian Flyway. So these three flyways, again relevant for your prelims examination. Right. So these kind of questions might appear to be very factual, but they follow this logic. So which are those? So the most utilized flyway of which maximum species make India their wintering home is the Central Asian flyway. So the Central Asian flyway is very important. It is through this Central Asian flyway that you have critically endangered bird species like the sociable lapwing, right? Now that is a critically endangered bird. Now this bird species comes to the winter habitats in India through this Central Asian flyway. Then you have West Asian East African, West Asian East African, and then the third one, East Asian Australasian, East Asian Australasian. Okay. Now, these are basically the three flyways which pass through India. That is something that should be by heart, and that should be in your memory, and it should be affixed in your memory. Now, another important thing that you can interlink from here is the conservation of these migratory routes of birds. That is also of prime importance. Now, that is covered by a convention And that is basically your Convention on Migratory Species, CMS, which is also referred to as the Bonn Convention. Bonn Convention. So when you talk about the conservation of species, for example, the Amur falcon, now all of those, they are the migratory species which are part of the region of India. That is, they make India their route when they migrate from one region to another. So that is where that also the Bonn Convention becomes important. It is in this Bonn Convention that you had Bangladesh requesting India to include Indian skimmers as well. So, what are these Indian skimmers? We will study shortly in the next couple of minutes. So, first of all, when we talk about all these are your flyways. These flyways used by migratory species covered by CMS, that is the Bonn Convention. Now, this waterbird census is carried out, has been carried out chiefly in the region of Coringa, for example, also in the other wetland complexes across India by various other agents. Where is this Coringa Wildlife Sanctuary situated? We'll take a look at it. But before that, all of you preparing for your prelims examination, do appear for the Unacademy revision test series. Now, this is a kind of a sampling test for all of you guys. It will prepare you for the examination with standardized questions, which is almost to the level, if not more, than the UPSC standard itself. So do take a look at this particular program and do make success a greater bit of reality for you. Now, coming to the Coringa Wildlife Sanctuary. Now, this Coringa Wildlife Sanctuary, where is it situated? So, this Coringa Wildlife Sanctuary is situated in the region of Andhra Pradesh, particularly when we talk about the region of the Godavari Deltaic area. So, where River Godavari ends up meeting with the sea in the erstwhile district of Rajamundry, and now you have the East Godavari districts. So, in those areas, while Godavari meets with the sea, it forms deltas. At the same time, it forms estuaries, right? Multiple estuarine ecosystems are created. And in those estuarine ecosystems, so imagine if this is River Godavari, it is forming these multiple streams, right? Multiple streams. And in between these streams, you have the sand deposits. Now, across these sand deposits, you have the mangrove ecosystem which grows here, right? Very dense mangrove ecosystem. And also, here you can expect the presence of brackish water, not very saline and not even fresh water. So, as a consequence of that, in this entire area, if this is the sea, this is your river, in this entire area, you will basically find the fish population to be abundant. Also, given that mangrove population is there, so wherever mangroves are there, that adds organic content and component to the soil. So, automatically, the fish population does increase. So that is why the water birds also come into this area to feed upon this fish species that you have. So knowing the amount of water birds gives you an idea about the health of the ecosystem. So Coringa Wildlife Sanctuary indicates estuarine plus mangrove ecosystem plus mangrove ecosystem. Okay. Now, where is it present? In the region of the Godavari River system. Now, India's third largest mangrove forest, protecting diverse flora. Now, three of the species which have been studied, black-bellied tern, the great knot, and also Indian skimmer, all of them are considered to be endangered. It is important for you to know about these species as well. So, when we talk about the great knot, so this is what the great knot does look like. So, medium-sized, bulky wader. What is a wader? Wader is where you will find slight amount of webbed feet and they can actually hop through and move through some shallow water, allowing them a greater access to the small fish population. Right? Breeding plumage consists of darker underparts with black and chestnut marking. Then you have the Indian skimmer. Now, this Indian skimmer, the population has declined because of the degradation and the decline of the riverine habitat, and also because the natural flow of the rivers have been impacted. How has the natural flow been impacted? By the damming of the rivers, by creation of barrages, by the projects which are going on for lift irrigation and so on. So once the natural flow of the river is impacted, in that case, the nutrient availability in the river also tends to reduce. As a consequence, the fish population reduces, which will impact the bird population as well. Now, this Indian skimmer is to be found across Southeast Asia, right? And low nesting success because of predation, trampling of the eggs. That is why the Indian skimmers have become endangered. Now, this is the species which has been requested by Bangladesh to be put under Appendix 2 of the Convention on Migratory Species. So, that is still under consideration between the two countries. Okay, so that is all that you need to know for the Asian waterbird census, where it has been carried out, which are the organizations. So, BNHS and Wildlife Institute of India, it is a part of the larger international census which is carried out. Now, here it is the Asian waterbird census has been carried out since when? Since 1987. In Coringa, the three endangered species, you have the great knot, black belly tern, and the Indian skimmer, right? The great knot is a kind of a wader which wades into shallow waters. When we talk about Indian skimmer, the population has reduced because of the damming of the. Okay, correct? Now, after this, we come across the Oran land. Now, Oran lands. So basically, these were in use to the later part of 2024 and the first half of 2025, owing to the Supreme Court judgment. Right. So, Supreme Court judgment was issued to consider these Oran lands as a kind of a community and reserved forest and to carry out the revenue mapping of this. Now, what are these Oran lands and where are they present? So, first of all, these are present in the state of Rajasthan. Rajasthan. More prominently in the region of western part of Rajasthan. Okay, western Rajasthan. So, there you have the dried ecosystem. So, in those areas, you have certain trees which grow. Smaller trees, not to a great height, they tend to grow. Now, on the face of it, it appears like a wasteland. But these are considered to be the sacred groves. Sacred groves, right? Now, these sacred groves, why do we call them as sacred grove? That is because there is some amount of traditional and the cultural reverence that is associated with these in general. There is the case of, in many of the cases, the gods, the local gods, the deities being associated and them being invoked when you protect and worship these sacred groves. Now, what is important for your prelims out of this? So in prelims, you can be asked about what are Oran lands? So the answer, sacred grove. Now, are they present in which part of the country? Oran lands are present in Rajasthan. They are multiple in number. There are multiple of these sacred groves in Rajasthan. Then what is the role of these sacred groves? So there is that cultural identification part associated with sacred groves. Other than that, you also have the fauna of the region, which is supported by these groves. For example, the critically endangered great Indian bustard, which is the state bird of Rajasthan, that is also something that you will find to be present in these Oran lands. So that is where the critically endangered species are also included in this. Other than that, when we talk about these sacred groves, the other role that they carry out is ensuring water sufficiency by trapping more moisture and sending it into the ground. So that is where groundwater recharge and water security is also something which is assured by it grove. So what is their role? Where are they present and what are they? Right? I will also give you the names of the sacred groves in other parts of the country. That can also be important for your examination. What kind of question can be framed? I'll let you know. So here, first of all, you will find various different flora, different types of flora. For example, Hejri, Babul, Hair. then Rohirra, these kinds of flora are associated. So, as a consequence, wildlife such as black buck, great Indian bustard, blue bull, and jackals, they are also to be found. And you know that black buck has got a kind of a traditional reverence, particularly in the Bishnoi community in the region of western Rajasthan. So, that is why it also becomes particularly important. Now, what has the Supreme Court said? The Supreme Court has recommended that Orans be granted the protection under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 through Section 36C. Now, the Supreme Court noted that there are other such sacred groves across the country. So, which are the other sacred groves other across the country? So, you have Devban in Himachal Pradesh. Devban in Himachal Pradesh. Then you have Devarakadu in Karnataka, Kavu in Kerala, Tarna in Madhya Pradesh, Devrai in Maharashtra, then Umangalai in Manipur. Then you have Gramathan in West Bengal, and then you have Pavitravan in Andhra Pradesh. Now, what kind of question can be framed out of these? So, a question can be asked that Devrai, Uminglai, Pavitran, now all of these, Pavitravan, all of these are a kind of what ecosystem or are descriptive of which kind of ecosystem. So, there, sacred groves is the option that you have to mark. Okay, so that is the case of the sacred groves. You don't have to recall all of them, but retain them sufficiently so that you are able to identify it in the question paper. That's it. Okay, now Food and Agriculture Organization FAO has released the Sustainable Nitrogen Management and a report about the nitrogen pollution and contamination. So, first of all, sustainable nitrogen management indicated and released by FAO. Now, what does that indicate? That is also important for us, our prelims. First of all, when we talk about nitrogen, now, one thing that all of us must be aware about is that all the soil across the world, the soils across the world, now they are poor in nitrogen, poor in nitrogen. And why is it so? That is because when you talk about the soil, how are they made or how is the soil prepared? The soil is generally prepared by the weathering or erosion of the rocks. Okay. So, weathering or erosion of the rocks, that is what leads to the formation of the soil. So, if the rocks have nitrogen compounds or nitrate compounds, then the soil will also have nitrogen. But the rocks, they don't have nitrogen. Why is it so? Because in our atmosphere, nitrogen does exist in N2 state. N2. N2 means you have the triple bond between nitrogen atoms. Now, that is considered to be very stable. So, this nitrogen is something which does not react, non reactive. So, as a consequence, it does not form bonds with the case of the rocks. So, the rocks will not have nitrates, hence, the soil will be poorer in nitrogen as well. Now, once the soil is poor in nitrogen, for any kind of crop that you cultivate, you do need the presence of nitrogen. It is a kind of a macronutrient which is required. Now, that is why urea is one of the fertilizers which provides nitrogen, and urea is the uh, uh, most prominently used fertilizer, most dominant fertilizer which is used in agricultural systems across the world. So, when we talk about the agricultural system, when we talk about the soil, now from the soil and the agricultural system itself, oftentimes nitrogen can be released in the atmosphere. So, that is something that you have to be aware about. So, when we talk about the nitrogen contamination or nitrogen emission, right? Nitrogen emission. So, in that particular case, agricultural soil and its management that has a giant share of almost 74%. Okay. Then comes your areas like combustion, industry, manure, transportation, and so. So, maximum proportion of contamination is by soil and even the livestock. So, basically, when you talk about nitrogen contamination, so it has got varying impact. For example, when you carry out or when you have nitrate contamination in the body, that also has impact on the body, right? You basically have a kind of a situation where the oxygen supply in the blood itself starts getting cut off. Now, this excess nitrogen in the farmlands, when it is encountered with the rainwater, all that excess nitrogen is drained into the nearby ponds, lakes, and the water bodies. And that is what leads to even eutrophication. It leads to eutrophication, which eventually can lead to harmful algal bloom. Harmful algal bloom. A very quick revision for everyone. What is eutrophication? Very quickly, let's do that in a couple of minutes. Eutrophication is when you are overloading the water body with nutrients. Eutrophication does not mean that algal bloom means eutrophication. No, it is an effect of eutrophication. That is where maximum confusion I have seen amongst the candidates as well. So, eutrophication is the overloading of nutrients in the water body. Okay. Now, these overloading of nutrients, what are these nutrients that we are talking about? They can be nitrates, they can be phosphates, all of these nutrients or compounds which are added. Now, once these compounds are, so where do you get these compounds? So, from agricultural runoff, you get the presence of nitrogen, then untreated sewage, from there, you get phosphate, then bones, and even the bird droppings. There also, you get the phosphates. So, as a consequence, there is a nutrient overload. As soon as there is a nutrient overload, that is when the algal species, the algae, their population starts to jump. It escalates. So, once their population increases, so if let's suppose this is your water body in any particular region, so on the surface, the algae will start to dominate. Now, this algae and increased population prevents the sunlight from reaching the ground surface, or rather, the bottom of the water body. So, at the bottom of the water body, no sunlight. So, no sunlight penetration, right? Available. So, when no sunlight is available, as a consequence, aquatic plants they begin to die. Now, these aquatic plants, otherwise, they would have been able to manufacture, let's suppose, some amount of oxygen by the process of photosynthesis. And that oxygen, which is released by aquatic plants, is very vital, very important for the aquatic species and the fishes as well. Now, once the aquatic plants die, the water starts turning out to be low in oxygen. Now, this algae will also die. When they die, after that, they are decomposed, right? Decomposed by aerobic bacterium, by aerobic bacteria. Now, aerobic bacteria means the bacteria which consumes oxygen. So, as a consequence of all of this, water basically becomes deprived of oxygen, what is referred to as hypoxic water. No species can survive in the areas where you have hypoxic water. And that ends up creating regions of dead zones. Now, in smaller water bodies, in ponds and lakes, you have the presence of dead zones. But do you have the presence of dead zones when we talk about, let's suppose, the oceanic areas? Do you have the presence of dead zones there? Yes, you do have, because of plastic pollution. For example, even in the region of Bay of Bengal, you do have the presence and existence of these dead zones where the amount of oxygen content is very, very low. So species are not able to survive. Now, when does this eutrophication become a problem and this harmful algal bloom become a problem? When there is lack of mixing of water. When you don't have enough mixing of water, that is when all the nutrients are restricted only in one place where the algal bloom can happen. It is this phenomena which is also responsible for the formation of red tides. It is this phenomena which is also responsible for the formation of red tides. In which area of the world? In the region of Florida, one of the larger wetland regions in Florida, that is Everglades, something that we have done in the places in use as well. Everglades in Florida. Okay. That is where you have the red brown algae, which creates the appearance of water to be red. Hence, it is referred to as the red tide. Now, much of that is because of the fertilizer that we keep on applying into the farmland. Now, the FAO has noted that there has been a subsequent increase in terms of nitrogen pollution. Now, that is partially linked to the food security. Now, when we say food security, so that food security basically means in order to produce greater amount of output and yield per hectare, in order to increase the cropping intensity of the farmland, that is where we are basically ensuring more fertilizer application. That more fertilizer application is leading to more nitrogen contamination. Then another term which is important for your prelims, which basically indicates the amount of nitrogen contamination, is the term nitrogen use efficiency. That is, when you talk about the input that is provided by the or by us to the soil for growing any crop, what is the amount of nitrogen which is fixed, right? So how much nitrogen is the crop or the plant utilizing? So it is also crop based. For example, when you consider soybean. Now, soybean, which is known for nitrogen fixation, that utilizes more than 50% of nitrogen which is present around it. Right? So there the nitrogen use efficiency is higher. In case of sustainable cultivational methods, sustainable agriculture, where you carry out crop rotation periodically, that is, after, let's suppose, you have grown rice and wheat, then you have followed it by peas, pulses, etc., chickpeas, etc., then there is more nitrogen fixation. So the nitrogen use efficiency tends to increase. So, nitrogen use efficiency is the ratio of nitrogen recovered in the final output to the total nitrogen which is used as an input. So, this can be very important for your prelims this time. It is used to describe efficiency of a plant in using applied or fixed nitrogen. Now, nitrogen fixation is something that you would have studied from your childhood days itself. That you basically have aerobic bacterium, anaerobic clostridium, etc., who fix the natural nitrogen, that is the nitrogen gas N2, and they convert it into ammonium NH4 plus. So that is the iron state of nitrogen, which can then be utilized by the roots of the plants, isn't it? One thing I want you to keep in mind this time is, because it was in news so many times, is the fact that whenever you have an event of thunder and lightning also play a substantial role in fixation of the natural nitrogen. Okay, so thunder and lightning, right? So that also, and lightning, they also basically fix nitrogen to the ground. Okay, right? Now, it is the ratio of crop yield to the nitrogen absorbed from the soil or fixed by bacterium. So, in nitrogen fixation, what happens? N2 is converted into NH4 plus. So, this is utilized. This is ammonium ion. This can be utilized by the roots, by root nodules. Okay, so this is done oftentimes by the microbes which are associated with the plant itself, or the microbes that you can introduce into the soil artificially. Now, poor NUE, whichever region has a poor NUE means There is inefficient use of nitrogen in agriculture, where much of it is lost to the environment, causing pollution and reducing productivity. Now, it varies from one region to another, and it varies from one crop to another depending upon the agricultural methods and depending upon the crop also. So again, a condition based question which is oftentimes asked in the prelims examination. In Southeast Asia, it decreased initially from 65% in 1961 to only 45% in the 1990s. Now it has slightly climbed up to 54%. So in Southeast Asia, NUE is around 54%. In North America, NUE first decreased from 65 to below 50 and then now to 69. So in North America, it is 69. In Southeast Asia, it is 50, right? So Southeast Asia, 54. NUE is 54. In North America, NUE is basically. So nitrogen use efficiency is higher in the case of North America. Now, even as I told you, it varies from one crop to other as well. So soybeans have an NUE as high as even 80%, whereas fruits and vegetables, they have a very low NUE. So one of the drawbacks of horticultural crops is that in many of the cases that leads to poor utilization of nitrogen and sometimes the nitrogen waste and the nitrogen. Okay. Now, here a PYQ was also asked. A previous year question was also asked from this particular topic. So take a look at this and then let me know if we are able to understand this or get the correct answer. Consider the following statements. Agricultural soils release nitrogen oxides into the environment. Cattle release ammonia into the environment. Poultry industry releases reactive nitrogen compounds to the environment. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? Our nitrogen cycle is easy. If you want to keep a note of that, you can keep a note of it. So this is an easy question. We have just discussed that the agricultural soil, livestock, poultry, all of them, they release nitrogen into the environment. So here the correct answer is going to be D, that is 1, 2. Okay. Now, then wetland accredited cities. So basically, in our country, two cities have been accorded with wetland accreditation owing to the number of urban water bodies which are present in that area. Now, urban water bodies have got their own importance. For example, these urban water bodies, they act as natural sponges. Natural sponges. That is, they absorb excessive amount of water and they don't allow floodings to happen. They also help recharge the groundwater recharge. Okay. And then you will also observe that they allow for water security, obviously, water security. Then many of these wetlands, they basically provide a kind of a basic flood control that we have talked about. Flood control. Other than that, support to biodiversity. To biodiversity. So here, which are the wetland accredited cities in our country? So you basically have Indore and Udaipur, right? Indore and Udaipur, these are the two Indian cities that have been accredited with the wetland urban area. Now, this is done under the Ramsar Convention itself. We will talk briefly about the Ramsar Convention and also I will tell you about the latest Ramsar sites which have been added. So, as per the convention itself, in the latest conference of parties, it has been decided in the past 2 to 3 conference of parties that wetlands in the urban ecosystems are probably more important to be conserved because encroachment will be higher in the urban areas. The impact on the livelihoods and the impact on life will be much more apparent in the urban areas. That is why Wetland Accredited Cities is an initiative by whom? By Ramsar Convention. Now, it is a voluntary accreditation scheme. So you have 6 parameters which are required to be fulfilled for your examination. You don't need to learn what these 6 parameters are. You just understand that there are parameters which are to be fulfilled. Once the parameters are fulfilled, the names are submitted. Then the Secretariat gives the approval as wetland accredited cities. Okay, so it provides an opportunity. So it is a voluntary accreditation scheme which provides an opportunity for the cities that value their natural ecosystem. It was approved when? During the Ramsar Convention Conference of Parties number 12, which was held in 2015. So that has been the point of discussion for some time in the Conference of Parties across the Ramsar Convention. Now, the accreditation is valid for 6 years. Again, vital point for your prelims. After that, it must be renewed, right? Providing that it continues to fill each of the 6 criteria. Now, when we talk about the Ramsar sites and the Ramsar Convention, so Ramsar Convention, giving you a brief timeline of it, Ramsar Convention was arrived when? It was arrived at in 1971, right? In the Iranian city of Ramsar. Iranian city of Ramsar. Now, prior to this, you basically had the convention associated with only the conservation of the waterfowl species. That is the waterbird species. They needed to be conserved. But over a point of time, it was realized that you cannot conserve the birds unless and until you conserve the entire ecosystem. So, what started in 1962 as the Mar Conference. Now, that eventually resulted in the Ramsar Convention in 1971. Now, this MAR conference basically stands for marshes. Okay, that stands for marshes. So, the conservation of the marshy area. Now, here it basically protects certain regions, or you basically have any of the wetland which fulfill certain criteria. There are 9 different criterias. Okay, so there are 9 different criteria. Any of those criteria, if it is fulfilled, then the state, the city, or the government can submit it to the convention secretariat. The convention secretariat examines this and then gives the status to that wetland as a Ramsar site. Now, what are these 9 criteria, by the way? Again, for your prelims, you don't need to ratify these 9 criteria. Just understand what they are about. So, for example, if any wetland has got a unique population of bird, fishes, etc., which are endangered, critically endangered, and are not to be found anywhere else. So it will be fulfilling a criteria after which it can be accorded the status of a Ramsar site. If any wetland is one of those water bodies where migratory birds they take refuge, or where the fishes they come to that area in order to breed, or overall in a part of the reproductive cycle of that endangered species, it can become a Ramsar site. If it has got a kind of a 1% population of any species, it can become a Ramsar site. If it has got some unique variety of aquatic plants which are very vital for ecosystem services, Ramsar site. So, any of these conditions associated with the ecosystem, that is the wetland, and how they are important to the entire ecosystem, it can be regarded as a Ramsar site. Now, once let's suppose a region has been declared as a Ramsar site, then what happens? Now, obviously, the region receives recognition. There is greater amount of funding by the state government, by the national government. So, conservation can be promoted. And nowadays, it is the local community's role in conservation of that water body, which is an important parameter which is considered before according the Ramsar status. For example, the Gokul Jalashay, all of those water bodies in Bihar, which have been accorded the Ramsar site status, all of those were very vital for the local community participation. So, local community, the indigenous population participation is also considered an important criteria. Now, here, there are certain Ramsar sites which require, some of them, they require urgent attention and urgent conservation. Okay, urgent conservation. So, those which require urgent conservation, now they are the ones which basically are accorded with another list, what is referred to as Montreaux. Montreaux record. Okay, that is when that particular wetland is entered into Montreaux record. This was also asked in the prelims examination in 2015. Right? So in Montreaux record, you basically have two wetlands of India, two Ramsar sites of India, which are listed under Montreaux record. Two of them. In total, how many Ramsar sites in our country do we have right now? In total, we have around 96 Ramsar sites. Okay, that is the highest number of Ramsar sites in Asia. Across Asia, that is the highest number of Ramsar sites that is present in India. Across the globe, it is third in number. The largest number of Ramsar sites in UK, Mexico, and then you have India. Okay, so here basically Silisir Lake in Alwar and Kopra Jalashay in Bilaspur, Chhattisgarh, they have been added most recently. This is the case of December 2025 when they have been added into the Ramsar list. Okay, now India has a total of 96 Ramsar sites. Okay. Now, overall, highest number of Ramsar sites in South Asia, third highest globally after UK and Mexico. Why does UK have the maximum number of Ramsar sites? Because that region naturally is made out of marshy land. Because of large amount of marshy terrain, wetland is very common. Okay. Now, Manisha, the understanding of the conference was further deepened. In Mar conference, the understanding and the consensus was to only conserve the waterfowl. So, in the next 10 years, you basically had the consensus making about conservation of wetlands also. Then Climate Risk Index 2025, which has been released and which is released by German Watch. So, the agency releasing it, that is German Watch. Okay. Now, when you talk about the climate risk index, why is this important? So, and what does it measure? It tends to measure the vulnerabilities that you have and the impact of climate change. How vulnerable the countries are to extreme weather events in terms of how many times you have experienced droughts, floods, cyclones, and the disaster associated with that. India also faces the brunt of climate change in the form of cloudbursts, more cyclones, drought cycles, heat waves, and even floods. So, all of that is an outcome of the climate change. So, that is what is counted. All of them are counted. For example, in the past decade, how many times has India experienced this kind of impact of climate change and so on? And accordingly, the countries are listed. Okay. So here, index uses various indicators like economic loss, fatalities, effective, the number of people who have been affected in absolute terms, and also in comparative scale. Now, this is the finding of the report. Here you will find that the most affected country overall across the world in the past decade, mind you, in the period of 1993 to 2022, the most impacted country has been Dominica in the region of Caribbean. Dominica is the most impacted. Then you have China, Honduras, Myanmar, Italy, and then comes India. In India, the maximum share that you will find is the number of people affected per lakh of population and also the losses that we face. Okay, so in India, overall, as per the decade counting, India's rank is number 6. India's rank is number 6. And then after that, you will find that the losses per loss or the fatalities per lakh and overall the fiscal loss also. Now, why is China on the list? Because the region of China also experiences large amount of typhoons, floods, droughts, cloudbursts, landslides, everything is experienced in China as well. Okay? Now, in India, we have had multiple spells of heat waves and drought cycles. What are the impact of these climate change? Heat waves and drought cycles, that is something that we have experienced. Then, other than that, we also have experienced more cyclones, more cyclones. Now, these are the tropical cyclones that we are talking about. Now, these tropical cyclones, their frequency has increased. At the same time, their intensity has also been rising up. So, both and intensity, frequency and intensity has increased. Okay? Both of them are high. Then, other than that, you also have the case where we have greater amount of cloud bursts. Now, which are the cloudburst provinces of our country? So, chiefly Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh. These are some of the worst affected. Other than that, cloudburst can also happen in the southern part of the Western Ghats due to the steep feature of the escarpment and portions of Jammu and Kashmir as well. But chief impact will be felt in Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh. Okay, so the entire Himalayan arc, that is what is impacted the most. Okay, now some of the key findings indicated by the report: the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature threshold was breached for a full year in 2024. Okay, what is this 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold? So that is the temperature cap which is expected to be maintained if, let's suppose, you have to limit the warming as compared to the pre-industrial era. So due to the industrial revolution, the emissions have increased, the amount of greenhouse gases, the warming has increased, right? So that is to control it. So, without higher ambition, the world is on a track for a temperature increase by 2.6 to 3.1 degrees Celsius. If the temperature increases by 2.6 to 3.1 degrees Celsius, as per World Meteorological Organization, that would lead to a substantial sea level rise also, which can be associated. Weak climate commitments for the various different countries. India is one of those countries which still maintains the commitment to fulfill the nationally determined contributions, and also principle of CBDR being challenged because of insufficient financing. Then we come to another topic, that is the ecosystem, that is peatland. So a quick recap: state of climate report released by German watch. Okay. Now, in this, what is done? Based upon the vulnerabilities, economic impact, loss per lakh, losses as a percentage of GDP, that is what is used in order to come to a solution or ranking. Now, if you consider the decade 1993, couple of decades till 2022, you will find that amongst the countries most impacted by climate change, the top country is Dominica. After that, followed by China. India is at number 6. In India, the losses or the impact due to climate change maximum has been the losses per lakh of population, the fatalities, and overall the generic losses of life and property as well. Okay. Now, then you have the peatlands. Now, these peatlands are very vital ecosystems. Now, these peatlands have brought into the point of contention, the aspect of global tipping points or the climate tipping points again. So, what are peatlands? It is from these peatlands that over a long period of time you also have the formation of peat if they are left like this for millions of years. So, what are these peatlands? So, basically, these are what they appear to be marshy terrains, right? Terrestrial wetland ecosystem in which waterlogged condition, swampy conditions prevents the decomposition from happening. Okay, so prevent the plant material from fully decomposing. So again, a terrestrial ecosystem, a terrestrial wetland ecosystem where you have partially decomposed plant matter. Okay, so when you have partially decomposed plant matter in this, so basically that means that you have carbon compounds which are stored, methane which is stored. Now, due to climate change, the temperature is rising across the world. As the temperature is rising, water in these peatlands, they are evaporating. Now, once the water evaporates and is lost to the atmosphere, means what? All the methane, carbon dioxide, etc., which was trapped, that will also be released into the atmosphere. These are greenhouse gases, which will cause further warming. Means all that water will now be evaporated due to higher temperature, which means all that material which was not fully decomposed, now they will get the supply of oxygen. So complete decomposition will happen, further release of greenhouse gases. So this can trigger a release of greenhouse gas on its own as well. Beyond a particular point, if the region gets heated or the peatlands are disturbed, it can always release a lot of methane into the atmosphere. So, production of organic matter in this exceeds the rate of decomposition. That is why you have the net accumulation of peat. So, in this, CH4, CO2, etc., are trapped. Okay, are continuously trapped. Right? Now, the role in climate control, we have talked about that the peatlands capture carbon, CO2, and CH4. Now, due to global warming, due to warming, you basically have the peatlands experiencing evaporation. When you have evaporation, that basically means leads to release of greenhouse gases. That leads to further warming, which means when you have further warming, it can lead to further evaporation. That means it is a self-fulfilling cycle. Okay, so that is why it is considered to be a climate tipping point. Tipping point. Okay, now peatlands, they occupy only 3% of the Earth's surface. They end up holding 600 billion tons of carbon, surpassing the carbon stored in all the world's forest biomass combined. Right? So these peatlands, where and in which part of the world are they present? So almost 70% of the world's peatlands, they are restricted to 5 countries. So we'll take a look into that. So the conservation level of the peatlands is also much lower, something that you can take a look into the text as well. So countries with most peatlands: Canada, Russia, Indonesia, US, Brazil, DRC, China, Peru, Finland, and the Republic of Congo. So all these countries together combined, they contain 80% of the global peatlands, out of which the first five themselves, they represent almost 70% of the global peatlands. Okay, so that is why their conservation is vital, and that is why we need to protect the peatland. You also had the Brazzaville conference associated with the conservation of this peatland. Okay, now then we come across another ecosystem, that is the case of seagrass. Now, what is seagrass? So you have the grasses basically, which grow in the marine ecosystem, in the marine environment. That is seagrass. It is a plant species overall, right? Now these are consumed by the marine herbivores. Overall, across the world, due to pollution, due to dumping, deposition, etc., you'll find that the seagrass population is declining, and due to which the species which are dependent on seagrass, their population is also declining. For example, dugong. So when we talk about seagrass, how is it different from seaweed? That is also something we will take a look into. But first of all, the role played by seagrass in maintaining the overall ecological balance and the ecosystem diversity. So, seagrass, first of all, provides biodiversity, supports biodiversity, provides oxygen by carrying out photosynthesis, provides diverse food web. The herbivores consume the grass, the herbivores are then consumed by the carnivores. They allow for nutrient cycling, they capture the carbon dioxide and other forms of carbon, and store it underwater for millions of years altogether. So that is a kind of a carbon storage which is very long lasting. It also ensures a cleaner water quality, right? And it provides a kind of a better habitat. Now, how is it different from seaweed? You would hear about seaweed also, for example, when you hear about Sargasso Sea, that is composed of seaweed, sargassum. Where is Sargasso Sea present, by the way? Sargasso Sea is something that you find in the region of Atlantic Ocean, in the central Atlantic, bounded by the ocean currents. That is the region where you have a lot of seaweeds. So, how is seagrass different from a seaweed? So, seagrass is a flowering plant, but seaweed is simply a large algae. Okay? Seaweed is simply a large algae. Then seagrasses uses its roots to extract nutrients, right? But seaweed extracts nutrients from the water around it. So seagrass will use the surface, the sea surface, the bottom of the sea surface, the sea floor for nutrient extraction, whereas seaweed from the surrounding water, right? Now, there are different species of seagrass and seaweeds. Seagrass produce flowers, seeds, and fruits, but seaweeds produce spores through which they can reproduce. Seagrass anchors into the ground using roots, but seaweed you will find associated with the rocks, the floating devices, and so on. So that is the case of the difference between seagrass and seaweed. Simple term, seaweed, algae, seagrass, a complex plant ecosystem. Okay. Now, this seagrass supports lot of species. One of the vital species supported by seagrass is your dugong. Okay. India has established its first dugong conservation sanctuary. So that is why dugong becomes important for this year. And dugong is very close in terms of the anatomy to another kind of the aquatic species found in fresh water or brackish water, that is your manatees, right? But in terms of the morphology, it is very similar to the morphology that you will find of other terrestrial herbivores like elephants, right? Now, this is one of the larger surviving marine mammalian herbivore. So, overall, when you consider dugongs, right, they graze on the seagrass continuously. They will be grazing on the seagrass. So, they are cousins of manatees, and they have a similar plump appearance and a dolphin like tail. So, unlike manatees, which survive in freshwater areas, dugong is strictly a marine mammal. Marine mammal. It is commonly known as sea cow, and they graze peacefully on the seagrass in the shallow coastal waters. Where do you find the dugong species in our country? So, Tamil Nadu has established and declared India's first dugong conservation in the region between Gulf of Mannar and the region of the Pork Bay. So, it is primarily in Pork Bay and some parts, even because dugong is also found in the region of Gulf of Mannar. So, where in our country do you find the dugong population? So, you'll find it in the region of Andaman Nicobar Islands. You will find the dugong population in the Gulf of Kambat. You will also find the dugong population in the Pork Bay. In these areas, you will find the presence of dugong. Pork Bay and Gulf of Mannar, Gulf of Kutch in Gujarat, and Andaman Nicobar Islands. That is where you will find dugong population. Okay, so that is the case of dugong. Now, what is the conservation status as per IUCN? It is vulnerable. Okay. Now, as per the CITES, that is Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Flora and Fauna, maximum protection has been provided. That is in Appendix 1. And as per Wildlife Protection Act 1972 as well, maximum conservation under Schedule 1. Then, World Wildlife Day was celebrated. Now, this World Wildlife Day is celebrated when? It is celebrated on the eve when you had the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Flora and Fauna, when that was adopted. That is on the day of adoption of sites. So that is when World Wildlife Day is celebrated on 3rd of March. It marks the adoption of sites in 1973. So sites also becomes relevant for this year's prelims examination. Now, here, what can also be asked for your examination is that when World Wildlife Day was celebrated. Now, that World Wildlife Day was celebrated and hosted in India by the National Board of Wildlife. So, who is the ex officio chairman, the ex officio vice chairman of National Board of Wildlife? That can be asked for your prelims examination as well. Okay. So, what was the theme of the World Wildlife Day 2025? The wildlife conservation and the finance for conservation of wildlife. Right. Now, National Board of Wildlife, statutory body which is constituted under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. So, the provision of National Board of Wildlife is provided under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Now, what are the members? 47 membered committee, now headed by the Prime Minister, who serves as the ex officio chairperson, Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, that serves as the vice chairperson of the national, again ex officio vice chairperson of the National Board of Wildlife. Okay, so that is something you have to keep in mind. Right, now there were certain initiatives which were stressed upon on this World Wildlife Day, that also becomes important. First of all, gharial conservation. So gharial conservation, now gharial, critically endangered species to be found in freshwater ecosystem like the Chambal River Basin. Now that gharial, to increase its population and also to basically have a viable population in other areas like the Brahmaputra river system and also the Mahanadi river system. So that is where the gharial conservation was stressed upon. Project Cheetah, to expand the ambit of Project Cheetah, because it was realized. Now, this is another aspect that can be asked in this year's examination from Project Cheetah. While many of the candidates are busy learning the countries from where the cheetahs are being brought, that is also important. You have, but it is easy to know, right? You have the regions of Namibia, Botswana, South Africa. From here, the cheetahs are being brought. Now, these are African cheetahs. Asiatic cheetah is not found in India anymore. Asiatic cheetah is a critically endangered species to be found only in Iran. Right? Now, other than that, when we talk about the reintroduction of cheetahs, this is the Transcontinental Reintroduction Program. Here, the rate of survivability of the cheetahs is higher than the global average in our country. Now, what is the ecosystem or the habitat in which the cheetahs survive? You have the scrubland, semi-arid areas, that is vital for the cheetah conservation and the cheetah habitat. Okay. Now, cheetah's expansion to Gandhi Sagar Wildlife Sanctuary and even thought to be expanded to Bunny grasslands in Gujarat. Great Indian Bustard Conservation Plan to increase the population of the Great Indian Bustard, which have been in conflict. Project Lion got a further 10-year extension as well. Now, here, There was also the program to further enhance the dolphin conservation or Project Dolphin. Now, for those of you who are unaware, now Project Dolphin basically involves conservation of dolphin species, both marine as well as freshwater. Conservation of both aquatic or freshwater and marine dolphin. Okay. Now, here, when we talk about in India, where do you have the river dolphins to be found? You basically have different types of dolphins to be found. For example, in Chilika Lake, you will also find Iravadi dolphins. Now, the Gangetic or the riverine dolphins you find in the Ganga river system. And in places in news, we had also discussed about River Kulsi being a tributary of Brahmaputra. So River Kulsi, which drains from Meghalaya eventually into Assam, that also has got some amount of dolphins. So even in some parts of Brahmaputra river system, you will be able to find dolphins. Okay. Now, here the sanctuary, conservation sanctuary is situated where? That conservation sanctuary is situated in Bihar, in the region of Bhagalpur. Bhagalpur, Vikramshila Conservation Sanctuary in Bhagalpur, which is in Bihar. Okay, that is where you have the conservation reserve. Okay, now World Air Quality Report. Now, this World Air Quality Report, this indicates the PM 2.5 concentration. Now, you don't have to retain which is the most polluted city. That is not the UPSC prelims level of question. It can be important for your SSC based exams, but or even state PCS based exams, but not for UPSC. The most polluted city in India turned out to be Birnihart, which is at the border of Assam and Meghalaya. Now, PM 2.5 or particulate matter 2.5. 2.5 here indicates the size of the particulate matter or the size of the pollutant, which is 2.5 microns. Now, you have different types and different sizes of PM, particulate matter. You have PM 10, you have PM 5, and you also have PM 2.5. So here, when you consider PM 2.5, that is the most dangerous because in this particular case, when you inhale, now the mucous membrane of our respiratory system is not able to even trap this PM 2.5. It is directly inhaled, and that is where it causes respiratory illnesses. Okay, so it is measured in micrograms per cubic meter. Data is visualized as per the WHO standard. Now, what is WHO standard? WHO standard is 5 micrograms per meter cube. Okay, this is the map indicating the PM 2.5 levels across the globe. Okay, so only 17% of the global cities they end up meeting WHO standards. Now, here, what is the WHO standard? This was asked in the prelims examination earlier as well. So that is why PM 2.5, given that air pollution is in so much news, what is the WHO recommended standard for PM 2.5 levels? Right now, when you see in many of the urban areas of our country, the PM 2.5 level is more than 500, more than 600. So that is why it is important for you to be aware what is the global standard and which is the organization releasing World Air Quality Report. So which is the organization? You have the Swiss company IQ Air. Okay, now when the new report will be released, if it is released prior to the prelims examination, I will come to you again with an update. So I will provide you with the update on YouTube or on the Telegram channel. I will give you the updated list as well. But till that point of time, you have to keep a track of this older list which was released last year. Now here the guideline is 5 microgram per meter cube. You have 7 countries who have met these standards. Which are those 7 countries? So you will find Australia, Bahamas, Barbados, Estonia near the Baltic, Grenada, Iceland, and New Zealand. So, Australia and New Zealand in Oceania. Then you have Iceland and Estonia in Northern Europe. Then you have Barbados, Grenada, right, and Bahamas in the Caribbean. That is where you have the meeting of these criteria. Now, the most polluted regions, we will talk about that also. So, Oceania, that is the region of Australia, New Zealand, and the island regions, has the cleanest area with 57% of the cities meeting the requirement. In India, a trend based question can be asked. So, in India, you had a 7% decrease in PM 2.5 level. So, if a statement is asked that as per the World Air Quality Report, India has been experiencing a continuous increase in PM 2.5 concentration. You will have a tendency to mark it correct because pollution is on news. So keep a track of this. As per the report, India observed a slight decline in 2.5 concentration, averaging 50.6 microgram per meter cube, down from 54. Why is it so? Because of increased spells of rainfall in 2024. You had increased rainfall. That is why you basically had reduced PM 2.5. Okay. Now, polluted nations, Chad in Africa. Now, that is where a lot of dust carried out by the winds also are a factor, 91.8 microgram per meter cube. Then Bangladesh, Pakistan, DRC, and then you have India. India is at 50 micrograms per meter cube. Okay. Now, 5 is average. Yes, 5 is basically 5 micrograms per meter cube is the average which is considered. Okay. Now, state of climate report had also been released by World Meteorological Organization. So, who releases this? You have the World Meteorological Organization. The climate risk index that is released by German watch. This is released by WMO. Okay, WMO is the organization, international organization, which succeeded International Meteorological Organization. Okay, WMO, along with United Nations Environment Program, led to the formation of IPCC. The reports associated with sea level rise, etc., that is generally released by World Meteorological Organization itself. So when you consider World Meteorological Organization, it will give you an idea about the amount of CO2 released, amount of sea level rise, melting of glacial ice. So all these detailed ideas that is given by WMO. Okay. Now here, CO2 accounts for 66% of the radiative forcing of all long-lived greenhouse gases since 1750. What is this radiative forcing? Radiative forcing indicates the extra amount of heating or cooling barring the normal heat budget of the planet. So, when we consider various different emissions in the atmosphere, they can reflect the solar rays or they can absorb the terrestrial radiation, increasing the amount of heat. That is radiative forcing. For example, in a region, let's suppose generally there is warming which has been happening. In a region, if there is a cover of ice cap, so the ice cap will basically mean that excuse me, that greater amount of solar rays will be re-reflected back. Now, whenever greater amount of solar rays are reflected back, that means what? There will be cooling, right? So that is against the natural cycle of warming. So cooling, whenever it happens, any factor which leads to cooling, that is referred to as negative forcing. Negative forcing. So radiative forcing is of two types, positive forcing and negative forcing. Negative forcing is associated with cooling. So for example, let's suppose you have ice cover, you have sulfur based aerosols, right? You have the top of the cloud cover. All of them increases the reflectivity. All of them are a part of negative forcing. Now, any event which leads to increased cycle of heating or in general increased warming, that is associated with the condition of positive forcing. Okay. Now, carbon dioxide emission will obviously increase the level of warming. So, that is why carbon dioxide emission is associated with positive forcing. So, CO2 accounts for 66% of the radiative forcing. This is a chart released by IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. IPCC. It was set up in 1988 by which organizations? By UNEP plus WMO. They have set up IPCC. Now, here you will observe, for example, the case of radiative forcing. So, for example, carbon dioxide, it increases the amount of heating. So, it has got positive forcing. Then, for example, other greenhouse gases, methane, halocarbons, nitrogen oxide, nitrous oxide, etc., that will also lead to positive forcing. Ozone, now, if ozone is present in ground surface, troposphere, it will lead to warming. If ozone layer is present in stratosphere, tomorrow we will cover about the declining ozone hole as well. So if ozone layer is present in stratosphere, it will re-reflect back the ultraviolet rays. So it will create a negative forcing. So ozone, stratosphere, negative forcing. Troposphere, positive forcing. Then stratospheric water vapor, increased warming. Then albedo, reflection of solar rays, right? Then you have aerosols, sulfur based aerosol, cloud albedo, all of that provides cooling, right? So, net anthropogenic impact is positive. That means heating is happening, right? So, positive forcing means heating is being observed. Now, this report has also indicated that what happens with the increase in atmospheric CO2, for example. I have provided you with all these charts. You can refer to them as well. But basically, when you have atmospheric CO2, increases the air pollution, changes to the nutrient content in the atmosphere, right? Variation in crop productivity due to the climate change. Now, when you have the variation in crop productivity, the variation in nutrient, etc., there will be a kind of uneven food production. So, it can lead to food security problems as well. Excess CO2 in the atmosphere can lead to the increased carbon dioxide absorption by the oceanic water, can lead to ocean acidification, and obviously warming due to enhanced greenhouse effect. Okay? Yes, anthropogenic impacts are harmful. It causes greater warming. Correct, Simran. Now, global mean surface temperature is rising. Global mean surface temperature is rising means what? That, and what is the impact of it? First of all, biodiversity, where they are present, in what population the biodiversity is present, there is increased migration. For example, many of the species of the tropical regions, in the marine species in particular, they are moving to higher latitude. Many of the marine species from tropical regions, they are migrating to higher latitude, and that is a phenomena which is referred to as tropicalization. Okay, so that tropicalization is also happening. Now, decline in agricultural and fishing yields, then the permafrost which is present, that permafrost is melting, due to which all the methane and the natural gases, carbon dioxide, which is trapped in this permafrost regions in higher latitude, that will be released, which can lead to increased level of warming. Infrastructure gets degraded due to increased warming and rising temperature. Displacement of population will happen. They are forced to migrate. Climate change induced displacement, that was underscored by the New York Declaration on Migrants as well. That can lead to water security, water insecurity as well, reduced livelihood opportunities. It all leads to conflicts on the global stage. Many of the species can also get extinct. Ocean heat content is also rising. That is the temperature overall in the oceans, the number of marine heat waves, the frequency, and the intensity of the marine heat waves is increasing, which is leading to ocean acidification, coral bleaching, and also the biodiversity to get impacted. Now, as the ocean gets heated much more, so there is greater ocean stratification. That is, the oceanic water does not mix properly. You have layers of low density oceanic water on top and high density oceanic water at the bottom. So, as they do not mix, or as they are unable to mix with each other, as a consequence of that, there is increased occurrence of the top layer getting heated up, more cyclonic formation, lack of enough nutrients in the top layer, creation of the dead zones, and so on. So, greater oceanic stratification due to higher ocean heat content, barrier to nutrient mixing, deoxygenation can happen, which can lead to biodiversity loss. Coral bleaching can lead to habitat degradation, reduced fishing yields, again leading to food insecurity, conflicts, and so on. Also, algal bloom, eutrophication, and higher greenhouse gas impact. Sea level rise leading to coastal erosion and flooding, biodiversity changes and losses, soil and water salinization. This was a question which was also asked in last year's mains examination. What is the impact of sea level rise? Majority of the candidates were restricted to understanding that it will lead to coastal flooding. The groundwater and the overall surface water salinization also happens, because then the seawater starts to intrude. Built infrastructure degradation in the coastal areas, again, all of this, reduced fishing catch and conflicts. Then ocean acidification. Why does ocean acidification happen? Ocean acidification happens when you have excessive amount of carbon dioxide which is pushed into the ocean. That leads to the formation of bicarbonate ions, and there, immediately after that, bicarbonic acid is formed. Now, when you have the H plus which is released, that means you have the acidification. Now, oceanic water is still alkaline, by the way. Acidity and alkalinity is measured by the pH value. If the pH value is 7, it is neutral. If it is higher than 7, alkaline or basic. If it is less than 7, then it is acidic. Now, in the global oceans, still the average alkalinity or acidity is 8.1. That is the pH value. So, still it is alkaline. Having said that, the pH value is reducing at a very massive rate, something which has been unprecedented in the past 3 million years almost. Now, once the acidification happens, in that particular case, the species don't have the presence of carbonate to form the exoskeleton or shells. So the corals begin to die. Multiple species like pteropods, they are not able to form shells, they go extinct. Many species like clownfish, they are unable to find the adequate habitat, so they also start to perish. Okay. Now, this is the portion important for your prelims, that regional variation of ocean acidification. So, it is not the case that everywhere the ocean will indicate the same value of acidification. In regions, so for example, Indian Ocean, Southern Ocean, Eastern Equatorial Pacific Ocean, Northern Tropical Pacific, and some regions of Atlantic. That is where there is massive decrease in the pH value. Acidification is very high. Acidification will always lead to the decline in the marine biodiversity, the decline in the coral population as well. Now, glacial loss is also happening. For example, in the places in news, we had seen that in Tajikistan, you have one of the largest glaciers outside the polar region. That is, which glacier is it? It is the Fedchenko Glacier in Tajikistan, Fedchenko Glacier to the north of Pamirs, where the size is declining massively. Okay, that is why last year was considered, 2025 was also considered and celebrated under the International Year for Glacier Conservation. Now, so glacial melt basically impacts the amount of solar rays which are reflected back. Right? If the ice cover melts, that means solar rays will be absorbed, will increase the level of heating. Secondly, the glacial melt, when it is happening, it can also lead to water scarcity when it comes to the rivers. The rivers end up becoming highly seasonal in terms of their overall characteristic, right? So weakened ocean thermohaline circulation, biodiversity loss, then flooding, landslide, mudslide, avalanches, they are common with the glacial loss. Even the sea ice extent, the sea ice is melting, which is going to impact the thermohaline circulation, which can eventually lead to more storms and impact on biodiversity. Okay, so that is all the findings by the State of Climate report by WMO. Okay, now a short topic we will take for you to understand the difference between bioplastic and biodegradable plastic. Now, this was in news in multiple different cases, but I don't want you to carry through the news which is important for the mains exam. Just concentrate on those important for your prelims purpose. So, when you talk about the case of the bioplastic and biodegradable plastic, so why was it in news? South Korea engineered E. coli bacteria to produce biodegradable plastic alternative. What is a bioplastic and what is a biodegradable plastic? Simple. When we consider bioplastic, bio means plant sources. So plant sources are utilized as a raw material for the manufacturing of plastic. Otherwise, for the manufacturing of plastic, fossil fuel sources are utilized. Isn't it? Biodegradable plastic, those plastics which are made from the normal fossil fuel resources, but then eventually they can be degraded easily in the ecosystem. So, while manufacturing, which is more climate friendly, that is bioplastic. Okay, so let us take a look at that. So, bioplastic, initially plant based material from the plants such as sugarcane, cassava, etc. So, cellulose, collagen, polyester, starch, all of that is extracted. They are dissolved in lactic acid, ethanol, etc. And eventually, a chemical compound is formed and then it is molded into a plastic. Right? Now, in this, you will observe it is biodegradable as well. Most of the bioplastics, they are biodegradable as well. Okay, now here, when we compare them to biodegradable plastic, that is where it is important. So basically, bioplastic from corn starch, recycled food waste, wood chips, etc. Now, biodegradable petroleum based materials along with additives. Additives help in rapid breakdown. They can leave behind toxic residue, right? But these are recyclable and compostable. So, out of bioplastic and biodegradable plastic, which is more eco friendly, it is always going to be the case of bioplastic, which is more eco friendly. Okay, I hope that is understood. Now, Global Energy Review 2025 was another report important for your prelims. Now, who releases it? International Energy Agency. Energy Review. So, who will release it? Energy Agency. Now, what does the Global Energy Review report tell you? It tells you about the changes or the demand in energy. So, that trend, that change in the energy demand, where renewable or amongst the non-renewable, which is the source of energy which has got the maximum increase in demand. That is important. So global energy demand in the year 2024 grew at a rate faster than the average. Now, renewables renewables accounted for the fastest share or largest share of growth in global energy supply, 38%. Renewables. After renewables, the energy which has got the maximum share, natural gas, 28%, coal, 15%. Right? Now, Extreme heat has driven maximum amount of energy requirement because of cooling solution. So, things to remember for your prelims: largest energy share demand is now by renewables. Amongst the non renewables, fossil fuel, that is natural gas. Now, China and India. So, increased largest energy demand is by China, followed by India, because these are emerging economies and they occupy almost 80% of the growth in demand cycle. Now, oil's share of energy has fallen below 30% for the first time ever, right? And 50 years earlier, it had peaked to around 46%. After that, it had been falling. So, this indicates the reducing importance of oil, which will have global geostrategic concerns as well. Okay. So, oil share of the total energy has now declined below 30%. Demand for oil, however, has risen ever so slightly by 0.8%. Now, the next topic, that is aim for nature report. Now, aim for nature report or initiative, this is an initiative which follows the success of aim for forest. Now, aim for forest was an initiative to increase the forest cover. Now, that had been a success. That is why Aim for Nature initiative has also been launched. And which is the organization launching it? It is the Food and Agricultural Organization, or FAO. So, FAO is the organization which is launching, and that has launched the Aim for Nature initiative. What is it? Accelerating innovative monitoring for nature restoration. 5-year program to provide AI, right? Satellite tools, ground based community partnership, empowerment of the local population, all of that to increase the forest cover. So, here, £7 million has been donated by the UK. Initiative will focus on restoring 30% of the degraded landscape by 2030, which is a part of Convention of Biological Diversity's Global Biodiversity Framework as well. Now, Aim for Forest is an older initiative which will leverage everything from technology, AI, participation of the indigenous population, and also the local community. Okay. Now, 16th Lion census has been carried out. It is the first detailed census which has been carried out after 2015. Now, this lion census, who carries it out and what is the findings of it, that is important for our prelims. So, here, and since when has it been carried out? So, India's lion population, which is Asiatic lion, exclusively located where? In the state of Gujarat, in the Gir ranges in particular, has risen by 32% in between 2020 to 2025. In 2020, you basically had restricted and limited kind of census activity which was carried out because of the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. And the fear was that it can spread to the lion population as well, right? Now, here basically number of adult females, which is a proxy of how many eventually the population will increase, that has increased or risen by 27%. The number of male cubs, females, you don't need to recall that. Now, where are the lions found? This is important for your prelims. So 55.7% were found in forested area, 55%, 44.2% in non-forested regions. So 55% in forested area, then 44% in non-forested region. Now, amongst the non-forested regions, where will you find the lions in greater proportion? In wastelands, right? Where semi-arid or arid areas where not much forest growth is there, scrubland of sorts. Agriculture, riverine areas, agricultural plantation, areas associated with human habitation. So, in non-forested region, 44%, forested region 55%. In non-forested region, majorly in the region of the wastelands. Now, since when has the lion census been carried out? So it started with the Nawab of Junagadh in 1936. Since that point of time, lion census has been carried out. Now, 5 year cycle actually began with the forest department taking it over in 1965. So from 1965 you have the forest department which does that in every 5 year cycle. Okay, tiger census 4 year cycle, lion census 5 year cycle. This was the first full fledged cycle or the census which was carried out after 2015. Now, regions where the lions are typically to be found. So, Gir National Park, Pania Wildlife Sanctuary, which is situated close by. So, not only in Gir, in the Pania Wildlife Sanctuary also, you will find the lion population, which is also considered to be the source population. Mityala Wildlife Sanctuary, one of the regions with rising lion numbers, that is also considered to be source. So, Panya Wildlife Sanctuary and Mityala Wildlife Sanctuary. Gir, obviously, you will remember with Gir lions. So, Panya and Mityala is something that you have to recall. Now, here, population in Barda Sanctuary is also there. Lion relocation is being planned in the region of Barda, then Babra, Jasdan, right? And corridor population has also been established, which indicates the healthy ecosystem which can move from one region to another. Okay. Now, let's take a look at this question. Consider the following statement about Asiatic lions in India. The lion census was started in 1965 by the Gujarat Forest Department and has been carried every 5 years ever since. More than two-thirds of the lion population is found in forested land as compared to the non forested regions. Okay, so tell me what is the correct answer in this? Very good. The correct answer in this is C. Why? Because you have to find the incorrect statements here. So, lion census was started in 1965 by Gujarat Forest Department. It was started much earlier by the Nawab of Junagadh in 1936. Right? So, that is incorrect. Right? Then, more than two-thirds of the lion population is found in forested area. Two-thirds means more than 67%. But here, you have only 55% in forest area, 44% in non-forested area. In that non-forested, more than half of them in the wasteland. So this is also incorrect. So which of the above is or are incorrect? C. Both of them are incorrect. Okay. Now, looking at some of the species, red crowned roof turtle. Now, red crowned roof turtle has been sighted in uh, in the Ganga River system after decades of absence. This is also what is referred to as Batagur Kachuga, also asked in prelims previously. So basically, Batagur Kachuga, that is a critically endangered species. Now, here it is endemic to South Asia. In India, it is also to be found in the Chambal River. So, in Chambal River, one of the critically endangered species is the gharial. Another critically endangered species is Batagur kachuga. So, where do you find that in India? So it is native to India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Historically, it was widespread in the Ganga River system, both in India and Bangladesh, also in Brahmaputra River system. Currently, in the National Chambal River Gharial Sanctuary is where you will find viable population. Conservation status IUCN, critically endangered as per Wildlife Protection Act, Schedule 1, as per CITES, Appendix 2. Okay. Now, long-billed vulture has been cited. It is considered to be an old world vulture out there. So, when you talk about long-billed vulture, known for basically comparatively longer bill or beak that you have, females are smaller as compared to the male population, found in savannas, means tropical grasslands. Tomorrow, we will also bring a compilation of all the critically endangered species in news for 2025, along with major protected areas which have been in news. That is something we will be discussing tomorrow as well. Okay, so today few of the species, tomorrow more species and reports are something that will be discussed in the evening at the same time. Other open habitats, now they are native to long-billed vulture, India, Nepal, and Pakistan. Now, IUCN status, critically endangered. How many species of vultures are to be found in India? You have 9 species of vultures to be found in India. Out of them, 4 are critically endangered. Which are those 4 critically endangered species of vulture? So remember WRIS. So you basically have the case of white-rumped vulture, then you have red-headed vulture, then you have Indian vulture, and you also have slender-billed vulture. These are your 4 critically endangered vulture species in India. So in India, how many critically endangered vulture species? 4. White-rumped, red-headed, Indian vulture, slender billed. Okay. Now, white winged duck, another critically endangered species, also very important and revered in Assam. That was also in news. This is again critically endangered species. So when we say white winged duck, so that is also what is referred to as deohans in Assam, owing to the very guttural voice that they have, right? So this is also white winged wooden duck found in freshwater wetlands and dense tropical forest of South and Southeast Asia, also known as deohans or spirit duck because of the ghostly call, right? Mostly found in which regions? Dibru-Saikhowa National Park, Kaziranga, and wetlands of Arunachal Pradesh and Assam. So it is a black body. It has a black body, and this is the feature IUCN critically endangered. Okay, Deohans or the white-winged duck. Okay, Dibru-Saikhowa, Kaziranga. Olive Ridley turtle is always in news, second smallest and the most abundant sea turtle globally. It is not only to be found in India, it is to be found globally as well. So they are known for a combined mass nesting exercise, which are referred to as aribadas. Okay, where thousands of females they come together on the same beach and they lay eggs. Males and females they grow to a same size, but basically females have more rounded karpash associated. Now, this is the range of the olive ridley turtle in general. You'll find across the tropical waters of the world, olive ridley turtles are to be found. Major nesting sites in India, Rushikulya, Gahir Matha, Devi River mouth in Odisha, and even Andaman Islands. Right? So, as per IUCN, Vulnerable Wildlife Protection Act, Schedule 1, and Sites, Appendix 1. Okay. Aribada is mass nesting activity where they come in large numbers, they lay their eggs and then they go back. The hatchlings, then they basically emerge out of those eggs and they join the water. Now, the last topic, that is Hulongpar Wildlife Sanctuary, was in news owing to the National Board of Wildlife's approval to set up the oil and gas drilling zone in the eco-sensitive zone of the Hulongpar Wildlife Sanctuary, situated in the Jorhat district of Assam. Now, this is a region which is well known for hulok gibbons. Hulok gibbons are India's only surviving ape species. In India, you have 2 species of hulok gibbons which are present, both of them present in the northeastern part of the country. They are the smallest and amongst the fastest of all the apes, inhabit tropical and subtropical forest in Southeast Asia. High intelligence, distinct personalities, and family bond character, right? So they are amongst the 20 gibbon species that you will end up finding across the world. In India, you have 2 species, Western Hulok gibbon and Eastern Hulok gibbon. Western Hulok gibbon, which is endangered. Okay. So in states of Northeast, south of Brahmaputra and east of Dibang. South of Brahmaputra and east of Dibang, also found in Bangladesh and Myanmar. Then you have eastern hoolock gibbon, which is vulnerable. Western is endangered, eastern is vulnerable. Okay, so specific pockets of Arunachal Pradesh and Assam in India, southern China, and northeast Myanmar. Okay, so that brings us to the culmination of the discussion for the day. Now, tomorrow, what we have in store for discussion: the biosphere reserve in use, the case of protected areas, the species, the critically endangered species, and tomorrow we shall also be discussing the MCQs associated with the various different species and also the various different reports which have been brought to the table in the past year, right? Now, a difference between appendix 1 and appendix 2. So in sites, for example, you have three appendices. So appendix 1, so it basically gives you the regulation for the trade of animals and the organisms. One, trade is absolutely prohibited unless and until carried for the research purposes. Appendix 2, greater conservation is provided. Some trade under regulated conditions is allowed for the species. Okay. So, anyways, so this is where we will mark the end of the session for the day. I hope you have liked the session. It has allowed you to revise some of the content. If you have liked the session, put that in the comment section below. We will meet again tomorrow. And don't forget to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. So, till tomorrow, take care. Goodbye. Thank you.